That we're going to read this morning is from the Gospel of John, chapter 12, verses 20 to 50. And it's not going to be up on, it is up on the screen. I was told it wasn't. There you go. Marvels of technology. All right, so John chapter 12, starting at verse 20. Now there were some Greeks among those who went up to worship at the festival. They came to Philip, who was from Bethsaida in Galilee, with a request. Sir, they said, we would like to see Jesus. Philip went to tell Andrew, and Andrew and Philip in turn told Jesus. Jesus replied, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Those who love their life will lose it, while those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. No, it was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven. I have glorified it and will glorify it again. The crowd that was there and heard it said it had thundered. Others said an angel had spoken to him. Jesus said, this voice was for your benefit, not mine. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And I will, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. The crowd spoke up. We have heard from the law that the Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? Then Jesus told them, you are going to have the light just as a little while longer. Walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. Those who walk in the dark do not know where they are going. Put your trust in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of light. When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe in him. This was to fulfill the words of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason they could not believe, because as Isaiah says elsewhere, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I would heal them. Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Yet at the same time, many among the leaders believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue, for they loved human glory more than the glory of God. Then Jesus cried out, those who believe in me do not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. When they look at me, they see the one who sent me. I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. As for those who hear my words but do not keep them, I do not judge them, for I did not come to judge the world but to save the world. There is a judge for those who reject me and do not accept my words. The very words I have spoken will condemn them at the last day. For I did not speak of my own, but the Father who sent me commanded me to say all that I have spoken. I know that his command leads to eternal life, so whatever I say is just what the Father has told me to say. May the Lord bless his word.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for reading. It's a joy to be with you this morning. Isn't it wonderful? You know, we're singing those songs before. Our God is mighty to save. I'm from a church not far from here in Botany, but we serve and we delight and we sing about the same God, don't we? And so it's great to be here with you in fellowship this morning. Well, I want you to try and picture a glorious place. A place where glorious things happen. Picture a glorious place. Have you got something in your mind? A place where glorious things happen? Okay, put that aside for now. Now, I want you to imagine a room, okay? It's dimly lit, but the light is white and uninviting. There's a plastic jug of water on the table and a sad-looking cheese and cucumber sandwich in a firm plastic container. A tacky hand-painted mural sits high up on the wall, and there's furniture, but it's all covered in plastic. The bed has white linen and it looks large and uncomfortable. There's an ensuite, but it hasn't been renovated in 25 years. There's no screens except for a monitor on wheels, and all you can see is lines and graphs, no pictures. Wonder, is that the sort of place you pictured when I asked you to imagine somewhere glorious? A place where glorious things happen? Does anyone know what room I was describing? Did anyone pick that up? Or room? What? Yeah, up the back? Hospital. Yeah, what kind of hospital? Any idea what kind of? No? I was thinking of the birthing suite at the Royal Hospital for Women. That's where we gave birth to where Nicola gave birth to our two daughters. It's not a glorious looking place. But if you consider what happens there, it has to be one of the most glorious rooms ever, doesn't it? The miracle of human life birthed out in those four walls. How many amazing people made in God's image breathed their first breath, cried their first cry in that room? Glorious. I've called this talk Glory in Disguise. And as we enter Jerusalem with Jesus, in this section, he takes us through his hour of glory. But it's not the kind of glory that anyone expects. It's glory in disguise. And before we get there, I wonder if the life of a Christian can seem very unglorious to you. Well, it's mundane, it's trivial, it's often unimpressive, it's not flashy, it's difficult. Why do our Christian lives feel so unglorious when we worship a God of such majestic glory? Well, that's the question this morning. So let me pray and we'll turn our eyes to the passage. Please pray with me. Father God, we pray that you would give us eyes this morning for your true glory. Help me to speak in a way that's faithful and effective from your word. And please transform us to live lives for your glory. Amen. I've got a structure, it should be on the screen, you can follow along. It's centered around two images Jesus gives us of his death and what it means to choose the right glory. Two images of his death and choosing the right glory. So that's where we're going. I trust last week, as you looked at the beginning of chapter 12, is that right? Getting some nods, that's good. You saw Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. And so now in Jerusalem, some Greeks, verse 20, want to see Jesus. And in verse 23, Jesus responds, "The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." Why does Jesus bring up this hour and his glory? Well, to understand Jesus' response, we need to get a sense of where we're up to in John's Gospel. Last week's passage Verse 18, many people in Jerusalem are coming to meet Jesus because they've heard he's raised Lazarus from the dead. And verse 19 tells us that crowds are coming for Jesus. But Jesus has something other on his mind than big crowds. See, this is a turning point in John's Gospel. The opening 12 chapters have focused on 3 years of Jesus' life. The next 5 chapters, 13 and 17, will focus on one night. 3 years, one night. So this is a pivot point in John's Gospel. The focus kind of hinges on chapter 12. And in chapter 2, verse 4, the hour has not yet come. In 4:21, the hour is coming. In 5:28, an hour is coming. In 7:30, the hour has not yet come. In 8:20, the hour has not yet come. And now, verse 23, the hour has come. See, now's not the time to gather crowds of Greeks who want to see signs or maybe hear Jesus teach. Now's the time to die. And so we're going to begin with 2 images that Jesus uses to describe this glorious hour. 2 images that describe his death: falling to the ground and being lifted up. So falling to the ground, look there, verse 24. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. You might say that some of the most glorious things in our world are plants. A giant tree towering above the rest of the forest, birds of the air resting in its branches, whole ecosystems built around this stable, glorious, life-giving organism. Or a field of wheat, bright yellow, bursting with nutrients that can sustain thousands of people. Both of these glorious things begin with the death of a seed, don't they? In order for glory to be revealed and expressed, the seed must fall to the ground and die. And here, Jesus shows us how God has made nature this way to teach us about glory. His glory. His glory begins with death. The Greeks that want to see Jesus, maybe they've heard of his miracles. Pretty hard to keep it in when you've raised someone from the dead. Their problem is not that they're too keen to see Jesus' glory. It's that they're not keen enough. They don't understand that Jesus' glory flows from his death. Jesus' death is the seed which will produce many more seeds. And his greatest glory is seen as he dies. Take a moment to think about what our world views as glorious. Glorious political might is about establishing power and influence. Glorious sporting ability is about exuding confidence and victory. Glorious people are those who succeed in life and overcome whatever's in their way. But Jesus says his glory comes not through power, but submission. Not victory, but defeat. Not success, but loss. Not living, but dying. And this is why Jesus' death is the centerpiece of his work in the world. See, Jesus did not come to heal the sick. He did that, but that's not why he came. He didn't come to teach people to be nice or to overthrow the Romans. Jesus came to earth to die. Look at verse 27. Now my soul is troubled. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? No. It was for this very reason I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. See, Jesus' whole life, it kind of turns on this verse as he pivots towards his death. And such is the significance of the moment. As Rob brought to our attention at the start, God speaks from heaven to say that he will glorify his name. But how will Jesus' death bring glory? Let's look at another image that Jesus uses to describe his death. Come with me to verse 31 to 33. Now is the time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. Notice the manner of Jesus' death, being lifted up. This phrase, lifted up, has double meaning. It's kind of John's wordplay here. You see, to be lifted up in the Roman sense was to be lifted up on the cross. And why do you lift something up? Well, so that everyone can see. When the Romans devised crucifixion, the idea was to make it as humiliating and denigrating as possible to the crucified one. Modern example for you. When the American government killed ISIS leader Abu al-Baghdadi, might have heard of him, President Trump, who, by the way, I heard he got shot at this morning. Anyone hear that? That's crazy. That's just by the way. Anyway, President Trump, when he was president, he held a press conference. And in this press conference, he details al-Baghdadi's final moments, how he cowered in a tunnel, hiding from the American troops, and dragged his own children alongside him as he was eventually killed. There's a quote up on the screen. This is what Trump said. "The thug who tried so hard to intimidate others spent his last moments in utter fear, in total panic and dread, terrified of the American forces bearing down on him." I mean, that's a bit gruesome, right? Why did Trump feel the need to broadcast these details about Baghdadi's death to the world? Well, you know, it's the same reason the Romans lifted up their victims, isn't it? It's so that everyone can see the weakness, the humiliation, the vulnerability in comparison to the strength of the executors. But the Greek word for lifted up is exalted. You see the wordplay? This also means to be praised or given glory. So let's talk about botany. You know, despite the Kellogg's smell, it's a great suburb, right? You've got Vietnamese rolls on Botany Road. We've got Falante pizza. The people are great. Proximity to the airport and the city and the beach. I mean, come on. What am I doing? Well, I'm lifting up the name of botany. I'm praising it. I'm exalting it. I'm giving it glory. And you see the double meaning? In 1 hour of Jesus' greatest weakness, his greatest humiliation, that is his exaltation. I mean, think about the cross with me for a second. As Jesus is lifted up to breathe his last, billions breathe freely the salvation of God. As Jesus is lifted up to suffer, billions are released from the suffering of hell. As Jesus is lifted up as an enemy, billions are made to be friends of God. As Jesus is lifted up to bleed, billions will be washed by his blood, forgiven and cleansed. As Jesus is lifted up to feel forsaken by God, billions will be drawn near, enabled to approach God as sons and daughters. As Jesus is lifted up to be defeated, he establishes victory over Satan, nullifying his accusations against God's people and driving him out. Verse 31. See, as Jesus is lifted up, isn't this the irony? As Jesus is lifted up to be shown off and humiliated, he's shown for what he truly is. The perfect, glorious, magnificent Son of God, Saviour and King. That's why verse 32 says, when Jesus is lifted up, he will draw men to himself. by his humiliating death on the cross that Jesus displays God's glory to the world and so wins for himself a people for God. The cross, like the birthing suite, it's glory in disguise. Humans made it to be the hour and place of highest humiliation. It is to be the hour and place of Jesus' highest exaltation. But it's one thing to be told about this glory. It's one thing to see Jesus do some crazy stuff. It's quite another to believe it. The Jews in our passage, they cannot bring themselves to see the cross as fitting for the Messiah. See there, verse 34. The crowd spoke up. We've heard from the law that the Messiah will remain forever. So how can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is this Son of Man? I see the heart of their question is, how can the Messiah be killed? The Messiah is supposed to reign forever. This was the Jewish expectation, that the Messiah was to be a king of all nations. How can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? You see, this is why the cross is so shameful to a Jewish crowd. It's incompatible with their picture of glory. What about for us? Where is the cross incompatible with our picture of glory? Well, Richard Dawkins, famous atheist, he says this about the cross. It should be up on the screen. In his book, The God Delusion, he says, I've described atonement, the central doctrine of Christianity, as vicious, sadomasochistic, and repellent. We should also dismiss it as barking mad. See, for Dawkins, and perhaps many around us, the cross is a cruel, problematic fiction because it centers on God's judgment on sin. You see, to proclaim the cross is to announce that sin's a real problem, isn't it? It's to say that God's judgment and anger is seriously real. It's to say that without dealing with our sin by punishing it, there's no way for us to come to God. Are you ashamed of the cross because it represents God's righteous anger and judgment on sinful people? At its heart, the world around us will always see the cross as foolish and baffling because they've rejected God and are living in rebellion against him. And so a socially acceptable Christianity will have to be one without the cross at its center. Are you ever ashamed to believe the cross? We need to be convinced that seeing the true glory of God is all about seeing the cross. And that's why John brings up two quotes from the Old Testament prophet Isaiah, verse 37 to 41. And did you notice the incredible statement John makes in verse 41? He says, Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Isaiah, a prophet, writing 700 years before Jesus was born, saw his glory and spoke about him. Well, what did Isaiah see? If you read Isaiah 52 and 53, the picture is of a suffering servant. See, Isaiah saw a servant whose humiliation would be his glory. He saw a servant who would die for the sins of the people who had wandered off like lost sheep. He saw a servant who'd be lifted up in Isaiah 52:13. A servant whose punishment would bring us peace. That's why it's unsurprising that many of the Jewish people do not believe in what Jesus is saying about the cross. That's part of Isaiah's vision. He saw that many would be blind, verse 40, that they would not believe that the arm of the Lord works through the victorious Messiah and the suffering servant at the same time. See, for us to have the eyes of Isaiah, to see Jesus' glory, is to see what the world around us cannot see. It's to see that his greatest humiliation is his greatest glory. To see that his greatest triumph begins at his death. And so, a socially acceptable Christianity will have to be one without the cross at its centre. So we want to be those like Isaiah who have eyes to see Jesus' glory. But what will it look like for us to believe that the cross is the central expression of his glory? What will that change about our lives if we actually believe that? From this passage, I want to point out two things that I think I'm going to focus on as areas where we need to be cross-driven. Firstly, we need to be the right kind of glory hunters. And secondly, we need to die with Christ. So the next few verses show us some people who have believed what Jesus is saying, but there's a problem. Come with me to verse 42 and 43. Yet at the same time, many even among the leaders believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved human praise more than praise from God. Why are these believers unable to acknowledge their faith? Well, did you see that? It's a problem from the heart, isn't it? They love human praise more than praise from God. And that word for praise there is actually the same word as glory, as in the glory that Isaiah saw, the hour of Jesus' glory in verse 23. See, they love human glory more than glory from God. So why do we find it hard to acknowledge Jesus in front of others? We're glory hunters, aren't we? We long for the glory that comes from people, for their respect, admiration, praise, honour. You're not going to go get that when you talk about Jesus. At work, when that colleague asks us about our weekend, do you love their glory more than God's? In front of family, when Jesus is ridiculed and despised, do you love their glory more than God's? When that opportunity arises to testify in front of others to our belief in Jesus, do you love their glory more than God's? This hits home for me as I think about relationships in my life where I haven't spoken of Jesus, not because of wisdom or timing, but fear. Verse 43 tells me that fear of man is at heart a desire for glory. But the heart diagnosis Jesus offers us in this passage, it goes even deeper. You see, the problem is not that they're glory hunters. It's that they're hunting in the wrong place. The issue is not seeking glory, it's settling for too small a glory. See, as C.S. Lewis said, we are far too easily pleased. The call of Jesus on our hearts is don't settle. Don't settle for too small a glory. Instead, come and find full glory in Jesus. And that's the point of verse 44 to 50. Bit of a complex few verses. Let's walk through it together and see what Jesus is saying. So, verse 44 to 45, Jesus shows that true belief in him means understanding that he is the full revelation of God's glory. Such is the family likeness between the Father and the Son, that to believe in Jesus is to believe in the one who sent him. But believing the words and not keeping them in verse 47 is essentially the same as rejecting him in verse 48, because they haven't understood that the words are from the Father. Verse 49. Don't settle for too small a glory. The words of Jesus are the very words of God. Speak them and you'll suffer. You won't be honoured in this life, but they're worth far more to you than the praise, respect, or honor than any human can offer. That's the diagnosis. In our sin, we settle for too small a glory. What's the cure? Well, verse 47 says, "If anyone hears my words but does not keep them," what would you expect Jesus to say there? "I judge them." That's wrong. "I'll be ashamed of them." He says, I do not judge that person. I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. You see, a day is coming when Jesus will return and he will be ashamed of those who are ashamed of him. A day is coming when his words will judge us and condemn us. Verse 48. But today is not that day. Today is the day of salvation, the day where we can come to Jesus, experience his glory, and receive eternal life. Verse 36. Put your trust in the light while you still have it, so that you may become sons of light. Dinner time is quite an emotional time in our house at the moment. Our toddler, Nina, she gets hungry in the afternoon. That's relatable, right? We've all been there. She begs us for a snack. Any snack. Doesn't matter. Just give me something. How do you help her? You try and reason with her. Hey, look, they're not nutritious. Do you try and show her the little nutrition information table on the side of the packet? See how much sugar is in it? That doesn't work. The only way you can help her is by giving her the real deal. You give her a full, warm, good dinner. And that's the fullness of her desire. The cure for our desire for glory is to come and see the full light of God's glory, his Son, Jesus. And the more we see and know and love the glory of God expressed in his Son, the less attractive the glory of people will be. It's fickle, isn't it? Fleeting, meaningless, when you compare it with the glory that God has to offer us in Jesus. But there's even more for us than just our words. Jesus' glory has implications for our whole life. We skimmed it before, but why don't you come back with me to verse 25 and 26. It says, anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. Instead of settling for the honor found in this world, those whose lives are shaped by the cross will live for the world to come. They'll see that the cross is not just the hour of Jesus' glory, but it is our greatest glory when we live a life of death with Christ. Dying with Christ, like the birthing suite at the hospital, does not look glorious. Here are some very unglorious things that a life of service to Christ might involve. Servants of Christ, we know, chose to care for their mother with early onset dementia at the cost of their own life ambitions. Others we know choose to work small hours in their high-paying, important jobs so they can invest deeply in family and church. Others, at retirement age, friends of ours, gave up their home in Randwick to go and serve as missionaries in Europe to university students. I mean, look around you this morning. I'm sure there are many glorious saints in disguise here this morning. You see, we servants of Christ wear the disguise of his death, which one day will be shed to reveal the glory of his resurrection in us. And as we close, I just want us to see how both radical and broad this is. This picture of dying with Christ is radical. I mean, dying with Christ is quite a radical phrase. And radical for us in that it will look so different to those around us. I mean, I don't know each of you and your friends and your lives, but in this area, right, we're surrounded by people who love this life because it's their glory. And so they live for the job. They live for the marriage. They live for the kids. They live for themselves. To die with Christ, to hate our life in this world, will mean being radically different, because we don't live for this world, we live for Christ. But the idea is as broad as it is radical. This is a way of living, not a specific action or call. And so the servant of Christ who understands the glory of the cross will live their whole life in a way that serves Jesus. This sort of life, it won't look glorious. It won't receive the honour the world loves to give. It won't hold on to wealth. It won't be comfortable. But let's keep remembering the glory of the cross. Glory in disguise. Though seemingly weak, unimpressive, and defeated, it was Jesus' moment of glory and triumph. He calls us to come and die with him, that we might live for the glory of God. Let me pray for us. Father, please help us to live radical lives that are shaped by the world to come, not by this world. Please help us when we have to swim against the tide. Help us to live for Jesus, not just in some moments or times, but in every hour of this life. For his glory, in his name we pray. Amen.